The rain did not stop. For hours, then days, the sky unleashed a relentless torrent, as if the heavens themselves were mourning over Manila. For 3 days, Typhoon Carding battered Luzon, turning Manila's streets into rivers. The city's familiar roads vanished beneath swirling, muddy water, and the world seemed to shrink to whatever patch of dry ground people could find. Families clung to rooftops, their cries lost in the storm. Children huddled together, shivering, while parents scanned the horizon for any sign of help. The city's multi-billion peso flood control system, pumping stations, seawalls, failed spectacularly. Promises of protection crumbled as quickly as the infrastructure itself. But this was more than an engineering disaster. It was a collapse of trust. People looked at each other, searching for answers, for someone to blame. As the water rose, so did stories of ghost projects, doctored reports, and stolen funds. Neighbors whispered about officials who had lined their pockets while the city's defenses rotted. The deluge was not just nature's wrath, but the result of years of corruption. Every inch the water climbed was a measure of betrayal. Headlines screamed, "Manila underwater as flood, defenses collapse." The news was everywhere, but the truth had been hidden for years. Rescue boats navigated what were once busy streets. Children waded through neck-deep water, clutching school bags and memories of normal life. The promise of safety had been a lie. The city's leaders had assured everyone that Manila was protected. But now, hope was as scarce as dry land. Modern pumping stations sputtered and died. Seawalls crumbled. The very structures meant to save the city became monuments to neglect. The real disaster was the greed that hollowed out the city's defenses. Corruption had seeped into every contract, every blueprint, every promise. As the waters receded, they left behind mud and questions. The city was scarred, and so were its people. Where did the money go? For years, budgets were allocated, but the evidence was clear. Substandard materials, projects only on paper, and a trail of broken promises. And a network of politicians and contractors who grew rich while millions suffered. The contrast between their luxury and the people's misery was impossible to ignore. The city was not just flooded with water, it was drowned in deceit, and the people were finally waking up. Their anger was rising, just like the floodwaters, demanding answers and real change. The scheme was simple, devastating, and called the Floodgate Scandal. Billions were allocated for flood control, but projects were overpriced from the start. Kickbacks were built in, bids rigged, and favored contractors, often political donors, always won. Substandard materials cut costs further. Pumping stations and canals existed only on paper. Journalists uncovered ghost projects. A drainage canal was just a dirt ditch, a pumping station an empty lot. Bank records showed money flowing from construction firms to shell companies, then into officials' accounts. The stolen funds financed luxury condos, cars, and lavish lifestyles. Ordinary citizens braced for storms. The architects of disaster lived in comfort. This was organized theft on a national scale. The economic impact was immediate and catastrophic. Metro Manila ground to a halt. Daily losses hit 5 billion pesos. Factories and small businesses were destroyed, supply chains severed, prices soared. Investor confidence collapsed, the stock market plunged, and foreign investments evaporated. Job losses mounted, hundreds of thousands out of work, the informal economy paralyzed. The cost of rebuilding soared into the hundreds of billions, money the government didn't have. Funds meant for education and healthcare would be diverted. New debt would burden future generations. The money stolen was meant to prevent this disaster. Now the nation must borrow to fix it. Economic growth was washed away, leaving only debt and despair. Behind the headlines, our lives shattered by betrayal. Every statistic hides a story. Every news report conceals a family's heartbreak. The true cost of corruption is not just measured in stolen funds, but in the pain etched on the faces of ordinary people. Maria Reyes, a mother from Marikina, lost her home and store. Her family's life savings gone in a single night. The floodwaters took everything they had worked for, leaving only memories and mud behind. We believed the government's promises. This wasn't just a storm, this was theft. Maria's words echoed the anger of thousands who felt abandoned by those meant to protect them. Her story echoed across flooded communities, heartbreak, anger, and lost trust. Neighbors who once felt secure now faced uncertainty. Their faith in leaders washed away with the flood. Benji Cruz, a nursing student, lost everything for his studies. "How can I continue? The people who did this don't see us." His dreams, like those of many young Filipinos, were put on hold, sacrificed to greed and neglect. The elderly and sick suffered most. With nowhere to go, they waited in crowded shelters, hoping for help that often came too late. Elena, 68, lost her husband when rescue came too late. For her, the loss was not just a statistic, but a lifelong companion stolen by a system that failed her. Flooded health centers, power outages, and disease outbreaks turned corruption into a death sentence. Hospitals struggled to care for the sick, while families prayed for miracles in the darkness. The trauma left a scar on the national psyche, a sense of helplessness and burning injustice. The wounds were invisible, but they ran deep, affecting generations. "You work hard, pay taxes, follow the rules," said a firefighter. "And for what? So some politician can buy another mansion?" His frustration was shared by many who risked their lives for a country that seemed to forget them. This anger was everywhere, in evacuation centers, on social media, in the faces of those cleaning mud from their homes. Stories of loss and survival spread, uniting people in shared grief and outrage. The flood washed away possessions, but not dignity or the demand for justice. Even as they picked through the wreckage, survivors refused to be silenced. The youth's dreams, the elderly's safety, the sick's survival, all were gambled away by the corrupt. Every lost book, every delayed treatment, was a reminder of what was stolen. The cost was not just material, but human, measured in lost futures and broken trust. Families clung to each other, determined to rebuild, but the scars would remain. The people's pain became a rallying cry. Across the nation, voices rose together, demanding change and accountability. The demand for justice was now personal. For every victim, every survivor, the fight was no longer just about recovery. It was about reclaiming dignity and ensuring this never happens again. As the floodwaters slowly receded, the devastation left behind was immense. But in the wake of destruction, a new kind of flood began to rise. A flood not of water, but of people, hope, and determination. Protests swept across the nation, igniting first on social media, where hashtags trended and voices found each other, then spilling out into the streets as thousands answered the call for change. Hundreds of thousands gathered on EDSA, the historic avenue, united in outrage against systemic corruption and injustice that had plagued the country for years. Students marched shoulder to shoulder with business leaders. The urban poor stood proudly alongside the middle class. People from all walks of life came together, breaking barriers that once divided them. Religious leaders stepped forward, urging for moral accountability and reminding everyone of the values that bind the nation together. Protesters carried handmade placards with bold messages, "Our taxes aren't your swimming pool," and countless other creative slogans demanding justice and transparency. Artists transformed mud-caked walls into vibrant murals, turning the scars of disaster into canvases of hope and resistance. The movement, soon called the People's Flood, was decentralized and leaderless, organized through social media, group chats, and neighborhood networks. It was a true grassroots uprising. Their demands were clear: resignations of corrupt officials, independent investigations, and swift prosecution for those responsible. The protests were peaceful, creative, and powerful, a living symbol of national unity and the Filipino spirit's resilience. The scandal transcended politics and social class. Everyone was affected, and everyone had a stake in the outcome. In the midst of shared loss and hardship, Filipinos found new strength and solidarity, supporting one another and sharing what little they had. These protests were not just an outpouring of anger. They were a declaration to the world: the people are the true source of power. The tide was turning, and hope was rising. Faced with mass protests, the government was forced to act. The president apologized, promised investigations, and suspended dozens of officials. Relief efforts ramped up, aid was distributed, and high-profile visits made. Promises of transparency and reform followed. New websites, media blitzes, vows of zero tolerance. But the public was skeptical. These were the same officials who let corruption fester. Critics saw the response as reactive, not transformative. The task force was filled with insiders. Investigations risked being selective. The government tried to patch a deep wound with quick fixes. The people waited to see if promises would hold once the mud dried. Task Force Floodgate began the legal battle, but the road was long. Investigators faced missing documents, wiped drives, and intimidated witnesses. The first arrests were mid-level engineers and small contractors, publicized as victories. But the masterminds remained untouched, fueling public frustration. The courts were slow, defense lawyers delayed proceedings, and justice seemed distant. Civic groups and media kept the issue alive, tracking progress and demanding accountability. Sustained public pressure was the only hope against political compromise. The fight for justice was a marathon, not a sprint. The nation's vigilance was its greatest weapon. The Floodgate scandal put the entire justice system on trial. The ombudsman faced immense pressure to deliver convictions. A successful prosecution would signal no one is above the law. Failure would deepen cynicism. Judges were under scrutiny, their impartiality questioned. The history of acquittals and technicalities loomed large. Legal experts called for stronger laws, better whistleblower protection, and campaign finance reform. But Congress itself was tainted, making real change difficult. The scandal exposed the disease. Now, would the system accept the cure? As the year ends, Manila's streets are clear, but the questions remain. The protests showed the power of a united citizenry and awakened civic consciousness. But the path to reform is uncertain. Corruption networks are resilient. The legal battle will be long, and victory is not guaranteed. The legacy of the Floodgate scandal depends on what happens next. Will justice be served, or will the cycle repeat? The answer lies with the people, not just the government. The tragedy exposed a rotten system, but also sparked hope and solidarity. Will this spark ignite real change, or be extinguished by politics as usual? The future depends on the answer.